Okay, so a new webinar today. Going to talk a little bit about fascia and its role in pain and performance, and just a little overview of it as well, because it's such an important concept and thing to understand that we want to talk about it because we want you to really realize, if you utilize this form of training and soft tissue and everything like that, it really will sort of unpick the body. It's massive, it's absolutely huge. So, first off, what is it? Basically, the connective tissue interlinking your muscles, your bones, your joints. And it's not just interlinking them, it's making chains and chains that control movement, posture, performance. They're so important. You probably hear us talk about the kinetic chain, the fascial lines, the oblique sling. All these things go back to fascia and what fascia actually is. So we've got basically there's can be up to 10 different sort of chains, superficial and interficial, but basically the seven main ones. We've got the superficial back line, the superficial front line, lateral line, spiral line, or the oblique sling, deep front line, arm lines, and functional lines. Okay, so they're the main outlines of the different chains which it has and why it matters. It's crucial. Like I said, these chains they help transfer energy, they stabilize the body, and create efficient motion. So just look at that again. Read that to yourself. Are those things pretty important for fast bowlers? I'd say yes. And this is why we are so hot in the way we talk about strength training, is because these things is far more important than strength. Far more important. We get these things right, and then we can build on top of it. Unfortunately, most people miss this. They completely miss it and they go straight to strength work. And that's when the body's again absolutely lambasted, shutting down, action's horrendous, injuries ensue, and then some clown just tells you to go and rest for a little bit, then start to load with a barbell again or do walkthroughs. Absolutely crazy. Okay. And so the payoff of doing it, stronger fascia, and again, stronger is probably not the right word. Fascia working well gives you better movement, less injury, more power. Now, is there anyone here, don't be shy, who wouldn't want that? I'll be amazed. But that's everything we want as bowlers. Everyone want as batters, any sport. That's everything we'd want. So we need to pay attention to the fascia. Okay, so the four main fascial slings with a little bit of pictures around it, pictorial evidence. We've got the anterior sling. Okay, so we've got your external oblique, serratus, pec minor, the contralateral abdomen, oblique, adductor, and just talking through those muscles, there's a lot. There's a lot going on there. So understanding, serratus, a massive throwing muscle, pec minor, massive throwing muscle. The external oblique and the contralateral abdomen. So we're going across the body there. So we got this first picture here, there. Look at those. Think of that. Everything we talk about when we're bowling, hip shoulder separation, we need to get that working. The same with the posterior sling. The lat, the erectors, your thoracolumbar fascia. Again, contralateral glute max. Look at that. Okay. Think of back foot contact there. Pretty important. Front foot contact, pretty important. Both slings. And most often, obviously, we see this back foot. If you're a right arm bowler, this back foot, if that sling's not working and we're collapsing, the other sling, when we land on front foot contact's got no hope, which is why we have to investigate how far we do with the body and what's working and what isn't. Then we've got the deep longitudinal sling with the erectors, multifidi, thoracolumbar, again, fascia. Again, back's pretty important for bowlers. I think so. And the multifidus, absolutely huge. Glutes, huge. Thoracolumbar, huge. Deep external rotators, if they're working, we've got no issue really with hip internal rotation. IT band, perineals, shin splints, anyone? If that's working and that's flowing the way we need it to, shin splints aren't an issue. And then we've got the lateral sling. Okay. So just going in from the deep glute and the contralateral QL adductor. You know, And when you're looking at the names of these muscles, we're so far away from just quads, hammies, chest, shoulders. And that's why we've got to be so much smarter than thinking that that training in your push pull legs, which is basically bench press, chins, rows, squats, deadlifts, is going to help you that much. It really isn't. Okay, we've got to be smart. I keep saying it, but if we're not smart, then we're going to lose out. And this is why we get the results we do, because we understand these systems. You don't come to us and we just say, right, just try harder and get stronger. That's the sort of rubbish that's been perpetrated for years. Well, since I started in 2000 with Somerset. It's now 2025. I've heard it every year since then. I've still not seen it work. Okay. So then we've got uh, just a little bit more information on some of the fascia and what the fascia does. Global connectivity tissue. So again, non-Newtonian properties. This isn't about the equal and opposite effects. This is a sensory, proprioceptive, mechanoreceptive, understanding, adapting. And this is why we do some of the training we do in and around the back foot to make sure that we're used to not having the same impact each time because you never do when you're bowling. We talk about force distribution, kinetic integration, excuse me, integration. Absolutely huge. Pain signaling, fluid dynamics, movement memory, all these things go into it. It's absolutely so important that we give it its proper attention. And have a little look here, okay? So obviously it's a baseball pitcher, not a bowler, but similar sort of issues. We want to get in the spiral line, elastic energy through that spiral line, the front line elastic energy, back functional line to force it, lower body forces, everything, nothing here is straight line training. You show me someone who's just doing bilateral, sagittal plane training, and I'll show you someone who will be injured very, very quick. Okay? There's so many forces going on. There's probably a little bit more with bowlers as well. Baseball get a lot of issues. Fast bowlers get a lot of issues. But, like I said, the body creates a link system through muscles, tendons, and fascia to generate sequential forces, transfers them through the kinetic chain. Most players are not using their kinetic chain. They've got no concept of sequencing. They've got all the different muscle groups. So they work on the quads to get strong. They work on the calves to get strong, abs to get strong, pec, lats, shoulders. Great. No connection, no sequencing. And when you haven't got sequencing, you are dead in the water if you hope to keep away from pain and if you hope to bowl as quick as you possibly can. Dead in the water. Okay. So implementation. I just want to show this picture here because when you're doing soft tissue work and when you're using, the vibration gun or even when you're using some of the sort of soft tissue balls, look how this is compressing on arteries, on nerves. And what we want to see is the fascia to almost flow. It's a living, breathing organism and it should flow like a river. When we're sat down in horrendous positions or got bad posture, it sort of gets glued down the fascia. So imagine you make a protein shake and you just take that out of the blender and it's all still moving. You leave that protein shake for a week, it's going to be like concrete, a little bit like fascia. Okay. If you put it back in the blender, start moving again. And that's why, things like getting on the trampoline, getting on the vibro platform, doing your soft tissue work, using the vibro gun, it helps that fascia to start moving. And when that happens, guess what? Your muscles are going to feel better because they've got more room. And that's why it's so much more important than stretching. Stretching does so little. It's embarrassing. You get your soft tissue going well, and suddenly you're absolutely flying. Okay? So it's really, really important. I just wanted that because that almost looks like a prison cell around the arteries and nerves. You imagine releasing that, wow, everything's starting to feel so much better. Because tight muscles might not be tight muscles. No, if the fascias, we're not working on the fascia, we don't know. Take the fascia out of play first. If that's fine, happy days. We know then everything's working as it should be. And more than that, you're going to feel just so much better. Okay. And last but not least, performance. The thing with fascia is we can remodel how your body moves through fascia. There's something called Davis's law, which talks about how when we're into the positions, the fascia will remold. So, look at that oblique sling there. That can start sequencing. We can build fascial lines through these movements. And that's why when we're doing it and we're working and we're using the soft tissue, we might be using the Viper, we might be using the aqua bags, things like that. We're going to have really seriously good results. Seriously good results. And when the fascia is working well and it helps the body move, it's going to help sequencing, help the kinetic chain, and those things will help pace, but it'll also help keep you robust and keep away from injury. Okay? So, absolutely crucial. The role of fascia, understanding it with pain and performance.